What impact will the presidential election have on the Fed's path for interest rates? Now, Brian submitted this article. It's from Investopedia. The top points here are which, no matter which candidate wins, it could affect how the Federal Reserve views interest rates over the coming years. And the main point at the top here, and we'll dig into this, main point was if Republican candidate Donald Trump wins, growth could be faster, pushing up inflation. In that situation, the Fed would likely keep rates higher, especially if aggressive tariffs are enacted. And then a win by Democratic candidate Kamala Harris, who hasn't proposed the kinds of aggressive tax cuts or deregulation that Trump has, could lead to slower growth, potentially allowing the Fed to continue cutting rates. Do you guys see it that cut and dry and that clean, or are there nuances here that we need to consider?
I think there's a bit of nuances. I mean, in reality, yeah, but I think it doesn't go as far as how they're framing it, where it's going to be a negative connotation based on how I read it. I think it just depends if you're able to prove that, hey, if we're going to do aggressive tariffs, how is that going to help us out? And if it's a good thing for the U.S. economy. But at the same time, on Kamala, slower economic growth, United States is a huge business. We're a huge corporation, and I feel that that's the type of the type of way we should carry our country. And I feel that either way, something's going to change, but I just don't feel the way that they frame it is just completely right.
Okay, what's your take?
Yeah, no, my take is get whoever's going to go in there and is going to make it happen, right? Because you can hear all these things are going to happen, but who knows, Andy? It really don't know. And then we got to remember also, the president doesn't directly impact that. The only way he's going to impact it is, if he gets appoint Federal Reserve members there. And then that's who really is going to dictate where we're going to go. The public has a saying. The economic policies that are established, that's going to say a lot where we're going to go and what direction. So I don't understand how that's, with the decrease of income taxes and all that stuff. I don't know.
So I think there becomes some complexity when it comes to those kinds of things because policy ends up going downstream and affects things that the Fed's trying to regulate and control, right? So I think the commonality here, at least in this example that's provided by Investopedia, is that the claim is that there will be the continued growth under either person. I think the way that growth looks is going to be very different, though, because it's arguing certain sets of levers over here versus certain sets of levers over here. And then the thing for the Fed, though, has broadly been employment / unemployment, price control, and then also inflation, hoping that those things will help inflation get better.
Correct. And that's what they're saying Trump is actually not going to help right there.
Well, that's what
they're saying is now that, with that, interest rates will remain high. And we got to remember, the way we pay our deficit back is through taxes.
Well, and it may or may not help. And that's the thing where I think that it requires conversation because it's one thing for it to be written this way, and then it's another thing for it to materially work its way through the system. So the policies itself or themselves, whichever policies there are going to have to be worked with. It's like adding another ingredient into a cake or a recipe. Well, if you add one ingredient in, you take another ingredient out, it's going to taste different. And so if you take another thing out and put another thing in, so regardless of the candidate, when you start making changes to those things, the recipe changes.
It's just going to be, an unbalance here and something else is going to get unbalanced. And so again, our federal government's teeter-totting with the balancing act of what direction they need to go into. And I think this is just going to,
I want to say one thing. First of all, the amount of debt that we have in the 35 trillion, or whatever, that's already a problem. Okay, now that's huge. That's not going to get solved overnight. So either candidate's going to have that to contend with. And they may or may not care about contending with that, okay? I am going to say something that I have been kind of watching, though, is what energy has been doing. If you look at oil prices recently, they've been going down. That is disinflationary over time as it courses through the parts of the economy that rely on gas and diesel in order to bring products to the market and all that. So I think that there's a way that inflation could be positively impacted long-term if energy can stay low. Yeah. That can only happen with deregulation. And that's one of the things I think that on the Trump side, they're saying that could help because then it eventually gets into all those things that are negatively affected in the pricing because of fuel.
And that's where I feel that people misconstrue what they say on public media, that it's like, no, it's bad, this is going to be bad. But in between the madness, we already seen him, enact some of these policies. He already put them in place when he was the president before. Therefore, I know that, some of these things will work and maybe others won't work as well as we want them to. But I know that based on the research I did, the presidency doesn't necessarily control the housing market, the economy, or any of the markets, right? But they create environments in which those markets could get used to, what the policy is being made out to be, whether it's going to let them, have more deregulation or they're going to be more tightly scrutinized. But I just feel that the way that, like Will said, the way we pay back is through debt. So in that madness of saying, hey, we're going to raise tariffs, we're going to raise or cut taxes, in the long term, it is going to help because it's going to make its way through the economy. It's going to take a little bit of time, and it's not going to happen one day to another. But we know that these things eventually will lead to the longer, main goal that we want is to bring things down.
My point in bringing this up to you guys is that the energy could achieve the inflationary goals that the Fed has without them having to keep their rate elevated for longer. So the whole problem we're seeing now in the bond side of the markets is that ever since they dropped their rate in September, now the bond market's gone crazy and rates have gone back up.
They've gone back up.
So all of the anticipation of them dropping the rate brought the yields down leading up to that decision. And then ever since that decision, it's like skyrocketed. I know we're going to get there later, but my point in this is that could potentially help them achieve their goal, and they don't need to then leave the interest rate elevated, and that could then ease other parts of the economy. Now, I will also say that on the other side of the fence, there can be some potential policies that will help with employment, but it's mostly because of creating new government jobs. So if you can create more new jobs and get more money in the hands of people, you could say then that will help long-term with our consumer spending and other parts like that. Yeah. But that could then put some pressure on whether or not inflation continues to come down or not, because now there's money in people's hands.
And the interest rates,
Right.
I mean, and we've been seeing this consecutively in October. I wanted to make sure that I went in there and I asked, like, hey, what were rates in October of 2022? And they were at 6.9.
22 or 23?
22.
22.
Oh, wow. 23, that's when they were at 7.7.
Yeah, I was just making sure.
7.79. And right now, we're already at 6.4. So I don't know what it is about October, but October hasn't been fun. October stinks. You know what I mean? It's
horrible.
And I mean, that's just to tell you how much influence. I mean, I don't understand. Yeah, you can get one president going in there, the taxes and all that. Remember, how the United States makes their income is through taxes.
That's it.
And so in 2023, we collected around and I got this here, 4.4 trillion, right? And our deficit on what we pay back, it's more than 20%. We had to pay thus far in 2024.
Payment that they made.
And thus far, we've paid 1.05 trillion in gross interest.
Insane.
Interest. That's and
right?
No principal.
Insane.
So it's just crazy to see these numbers, and yet our deficit's $35 trillion. That's a whole lot of money.
Yeah, and then not to get like nefarious, but I mean, what is there even an intention to pay that back over time? And then how do you do that?
Well, that's how they do it. That's why they had a decrease, right? Right now, the Fed is borrowing the money now at a lesser price. So don't be surprised. They say that by 2026, we should see the rates in the threes. Don't be surprised if that does happen, because that's how they borrow the money in order to pay back all this deficit.
Yeah,
right. Because and this is at right now 1%.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So imagine now they're borrowing at 4%. It's advantageous for them to reduce the Fed funds rate.
Yeah, their payments are going to go lower, and it's going to help.
That's correct. That's how they're able to. They're going to create a catastrophe so that they're able to freaking pay some of this back.
They need to turn the money printer on again.
That's
somehow,
correct.
Some
Figure
way,
out
stimulate what's going to happen. What's going to be the big how do I say, black swan event?
Yeah, but I mean, I like all the ideas. What everybody's approaching. Kamala putting that $25,000, home buyer credit. They're trying to figure something out. Let's see what's going to work.
Yeah, we talked about this last week when you were here, Brian. But it's like everything up until it actually happens is just one giant pitch session. And some will happen, some won't happen, and then you got well, now we're dealt this hand. Now what's that mean?
And then campaigning is a lot different than actually being in office, making actually those decisions. And you can campaign all you want, say everything that you want to say, and like, hey, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Day one, you get in, then you really start saying, okay, well, I can't do that. It's going to take a little bit more to do that. So I think that whatever the coin falls, I think it's going to be very interesting.
So what's interesting about you making that point, though, is that now coming into this brand new term, either candidate has now already spent time in the White House. So you have, I know people go, the vice president doesn't live in the White House. Okay,
no, but that's
in the administration,
true, right?
So you have 4 years from 16 to 20, and then 4 years from 20 to 24. Now, whoever comes in at 2025 has already spent 4 years of the last 8 doing the thing.
Yeah.
So that is going to be, I think,
that's a great point, Andy.
potentially helpful. I just don't know. I just don't know because it's going to come down to motive.
Yeah, because we already know what Trump's done. We already had him in there.
Yeah,
and we already know what Kamala is more or less going to do since she's been there already the last 4 years.
Well.
Yeah.
And
which is pretty crazy.
The thing to me is that, like, and I don't want to get too political, but if she says
Please.
I'm the vice president, like I can't do much, but it's the same thing as like, hey, if I don't like something, hey, Will, like maybe we shouldn't do it that way. And she still has some sort of influence.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not leading the company, but at the same time, we all have a voice. Like, hey, you're making the decision, but maybe we shouldn't do that. So I'm like, you can't really hide behind the fact that there's no influence that she has in the decisions being made.
I think what this one is going to come down to is mostly economic advisor.
Oh,
who's going to be the economic advisor? Not just the person standing at the podium saying the thing, but who's actually going to be mechanically giving the input and advice on what should be done and how and why, and then which people benefit from that. Because I know also here's what happens is candidates, again, either side, they make promises, and then sometimes they find out, oh, shoot, I actually can't fulfill that promise because of some functional reason.
Yeah.
And then now you've led your voter base to think you're going to get this thing, and then you don't. And then now you can't do it, and then now the economy or the Fed or whoever, now then that has to sort out the truth of that too.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely excited to see who's going to take presidency. Are we going to have our first female? You know, it's pretty crazy to think that.
According to the betting markets.
And it sounds like that may be, the case, but we'll see.
Yeah, this one is going to be. Look, I have this note locked and loaded for later too. But regardless of what the outcome is, half the people in our country are going to be mad.
Yeah, of course, it's always like that.
It seems more like that now than it has been in 2020 and even.
That'll be pretty crazy because Mexico has their first female president. Now, are we gonna do ours? Like,
I don't know.
Who knows?
I don't know.
Who knows?
I don't know.
You know.
We probably need to drop this one and go on, guys.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's do it.
One of us starts getting mad.
No, it's just beating a dead horse. So
here's the thing with all of that. We're gonna either way, whoever gets in there, we have to adjust.
So we're kind of like the Fed. Whatever, whoever goes in presidency, we're going to have to adjust to whatever the way that they're running the country. So at the end of the day, whoever gets in there, we're going to figure it out.
And then we're just here to support that, right? Like you have no choice. Well,
we're going to have to deal with it anyways.
You don't have choice. You do have a choice, but I've always been, it's like, I just got to conform to it and I'll support whatever I can.
Here's the thing. We have a choice. We can vote. Okay. So if you vote, you may not get the outcome you want. But even if you don't get the outcome you want, you still have to show up and do your work.
That's correct.
We still have to work in the system of the banking industry and all that. So we're still dealt the hand we're dealt and have to figure that out in order to keep the business up and then help veterans and active duty members get their houses. So
in the last 8 years, we've had 2 different presidencies. We've gone through both of them. We're still here. We're still moving forward.
Exactly.
I mean,